We imagine the samurai as noble warriors, disciplined, loyal, bound by honor and bushidō. But history hides darker truths. There was a time when rice fields became hunting grounds, when helpless peasants, men, women, even children, were slaughtered not in war, but for amusement. These were not isolated crimes. In parts of medieval Japan, samurai cruelty toward farmers was treated as sport, a deadly game hidden in the shadows of feudal life. Why would warriors celebrated for their discipline turn their blades against the very peasants who fed them? And why has this brutal chapter of Japanese history been quietly erased? Tonight, we uncover the dark history of samurai atrocities, the forgotten story of when samurai slaughtered farmers for sport. If you love uncovering secrets buried in history, subscribe now. More untold stories are coming. To understand how such cruelty was possible, we must step back into feudal Japan. Society was a rigid pyramid. At the top, the emperor and the shogun. Below them, the daimyo warlords and their samurai retainers. At the very bottom, farmers. Though peasants produced the rice that kept the nation alive, they lived without protection. They paid heavy taxes, fed armies, and yet held no power. The peasant's year revolved around the rice harvest. Every grain was counted and taxed. In bad seasons, they starved while their lords dined. The very food they grew was used to control them. The law itself placed their lives in jeopardy. A custom known as Kiri-sute Gomen gave samurai the legal right to strike down a commoner who disrespected them, instantly, with no trial. In theory, it upheld order. In practice, it left peasants at the mercy of the sword. For the farmers of feudal Japan, life was always lived on a blade's edge. The phrase Kiri-sute Gomen, permission to cut and leave, was essentially a license to kill. It came with rules, at least on paper. The strike had to follow the insult immediately. A witness was required, and misuse could bring punishment or confiscation of the sword. Yet justice depended entirely on class. A peasant's word carried no weight against a samurai's testimony. In one Edo-era account, a farmer named Genpaki accidentally splashed muddy water onto a warrior's robe. The samurai cut him down where he stood. Officials ruled it justified. The honor of the sword had been stained. Genpaki's family received neither apology nor compensation. Such stories were whispered in villages as warnings. Keep your head low, your eyes down, and your mouth shut. When Kiri-sute Gomen met human ego, law became terror dressed in silk. Power without restraint always turns to cruelty. In remote provinces, samurai began to twist their rights into demonstrations of dominance. They invoked Kiri-sute Gomen not to protect honor, but to remind villages who ruled. A samurai might ride through rice fields at sunrise. If a peasant didn't bow low enough or step aside quickly, steel flashed. Daimyos rarely intervened. They needed obedience, not justice. And so fear became a governing tool. During the Sengoku era, when Japan was torn by civil war, samurai patrols acted as local law. They were unpaid and survived off taxes they collected at sword point. The line between soldier and bandit blurred. Across cultures, it was the same. European knights terrorized serfs, and Japan's warriors too used fear to ensure submission. The fields that fed the nation became stages for power, and in those fields, blood often replaced the morning dew. Another practice blurred the line between duty and savagery, Tameshigiri, the art of test cutting. Swordsmiths and warriors tested new blades on straw and bamboo, but records tell a darker story. Sometimes the test used human cadavers, the bodies of executed criminals, bound and stacked. Cuts were measured by how many bodies the blade passed through. A perfect sword might bear an inscription on its tang. Cut clean through 2 torsos at the chest. These grisly demonstrations were performed by the Yamada family, professional testers of the Edo period. People said a Yamada executioner could slice through a body as easily as through rice straw. But legend spoke of worse acts. Ikitamishi, the living test. Condemned prisoners were used while still alive to measure not just sharpness, but cruelty. And then there was tsujigiri, the crossroad killing. A samurai, drunk on power or pride, drew his blade on a random passerby to test his nerve. To some, it was a test of courage. To others, it was a murder without name. Even centuries later, travelers whispered prayers when walking alone after dark. They carried the echo of real violence, and every echo was a warning. The fields that fed Japan became proving grounds for death. To the samurai, it was skill. To the peasants, it was terror without mercy. History writes with ink, but folklore remembers with shadows. Across rural Japan, villagers spoke of cursed paddies where rice refused to grow. These were onryo, vengeful spirits of those slain unjustly by the sword. In the north, people feared the Akagawa fields, where a retainer once cut down 7 farmers in a single morning. At night, blue flames flicked above the water, the souls of the dead demanding justice. Far south in Kyushu, the blood pond of Chikugo was said to bubble red each harvest season. To the locals, those stories were not fantasy, they were memory disguised as myth. Each whispered legend was a fragment of history too painful to speak aloud. In 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu rose as shogun and brought the chaos to an end. Dead peasants could not plant rice, empty fields meant famine. So new edicts curbed samurai excess. Sword testing moved behind prison walls under official supervision. For the first time in generations, the fields began to quiet. Samurai laid down spears for ledgers, becoming bureaucrats and tax collectors. Few remembered the fear their ancestors once inspired. History polished the blade, but never washed away the stain. The same men who once took lives now managed ledgers of rice and coin. A samurai's worth was measured not by courage but by calligraphy. The peace that ended slaughter also dulled the warrior spirit. Over generations, the atrocities faded from memory, replaced by poems, theater, and legend. The empire had traded chaos for control, and amnesia became the price of order. The peasants were the backbone of the nation, yet their voices vanished. Half their harvest was taken in tax, and even their rice fed their oppressors. When oppression became unbearable, rebellion erupted. The Shimabara Rebellion of 1637 ended in annihilation. 37,000 dead. Peace returned, but so did silence. Their grief went underground, preserved only in folklore and whispered prayers. In many villages, memories transformed into ghost stories. Every haunted tale was history speaking in disguise. Over time, scholars uncovered edicts and scrolls revealing awareness of cruelty beneath the order. Few remembered that for countless families, the sight of a sword once meant certain death. The peasant's silence was not consent, it was survival. And in that quiet remembrance, the truth endures long after the swords have turned to dust. Centuries passed, and the samurai became symbols of discipline and devotion. Their armor gleams in museums, their portraits adorn textbooks. They are remembered as paragons of loyalty and courage, the very essence of Japan's honor. But behind that polished myth lies a truth far less noble. The same swords that defended castles were sometimes turned against the powerless. The same warriors who spoke of duty and restraint once tested their blades on the hands that tilled their fields. To remember only the honor is to erase the pain that built it. History has a way of washing blood from its stories, but the stain always returns in the rain. It seeps through the soil, through folklore, through memory. Every legend of a vengeful ghost, every cursed rice paddy, is history whispering, "I was here." The myth of the perfect warrior hides a nation's oldest wound. Their blood was the ink that wrote bushidō. Humanity glorifies its conquerors. We remember the armor, not the ashes, the code, not the corpses. But to understand honor, we must first confront cruelty. For every hero carved into legend, 1,000 nameless lives were buried beneath its feet. History polishes its heroes, yet every gleaming blade hides rust and memory. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden in these forgotten fields, that power without empathy always turns to atrocity, and that even the most disciplined heart can be devoured by pride. The samurai's code taught respect and restraint, but without compassion, it became an excuse for domination. True honor lies not in the strength to kill, but in the choice not to. That choice was often denied to the peasants of Japan. Their stories were silenced, but not lost. The land still remembers, and the ghosts still walk where the rice once grew red. Today, when we celebrate the elegance of samurai culture, their armor, their calligraphy, their art, we should also remember the shadows that walked beside them. For every blade forged in honor, there was a scream that no one heard. For every scroll praising bushidō, there was a mother mourning in silence. The myth of purity is always built on forgotten pain, and to know history fully, we must listen to the whispers it tries to hide. If this story unsettles you, wait until you hear what happened behind Japan's most famous castle, a massacre lost to time, hidden beneath stone and legend. Click here to uncover it. And if you believe history should be told in full, subscribe now. More dark truths from Japan's buried past await. Music fades. Broken katana rests half buried in the soil. A whisper lingers. Even in silence, history speaks.